Welcome to the audio ministry of Nanda Flora Williams. She is a speaker, author, psalmist, and coach. As you listen, be inspired, motivated, and challenged.
Hi, welcome to Treasures for Living, and we are going to be talking about Judas and Jacob. We're going to be exploring things around betrayal, being betrayed. I'll read a portion of scripture and we will continue from there. Matthew 26. We will be reading from verse 36. Then Jesus went with them to the olive grove called Gethsemane, and he said, I checked the meaning of the word Gethsemane, and it is the oil press. It's an interesting place for Jesus to go to, and a place where he was betrayed. And I thought about the fact that when we're betrayed, we are in a place where there's pressing going on, and God allows us to go through a season when he sifts out things out of our lives, and we go through a purifying process. Painful, but if we go through it well, it brings out good at the end. So, Matthew 26 and verse 36. Then Jesus went with them to the olive grove called Gethsemane, and he said, sit here while I go over there to pray. He took Peter and Zebedee's two sons, James and John, and he became anguished and distressed. He told them, my soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. He went on a little further and bowed with his face to the ground, praying, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup of suffering be taken away from me. Yet I want your will to be done and not mine. We see Jesus in a vulnerable place, and he's actually telling his disciples what's going on within him. So he's not in his most comfortable place. It's not like he's flying high at this point. His soul is in anguish. Verse 40, it says, then he returned to his disciples and found them asleep. He said to Peter, couldn't you watch with me even 1 hour? Keep watch and pray so that you will not give in to temptation. For the spirit is willing, but the body is weak. Then Jesus left them a second time and prayed, my Father, if this cup cannot be taken away unless I drink it, your will be done. When he returned to them again, he found them sleeping, for they couldn't keep their eyes open. So he went to pray a third time, saying the same thing again. Then he came to the disciples and said, go ahead and sleep, have your rest. But look, the time has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Up, let's be going. Look, my betrayer is here. Verse 47, and as Jesus said this, Judas, one of the 12 disciples. It's interesting now when you experience betrayal, it's never from someone who is very far. It's someone who's close. And it's usually someone who's your friend, someone who you trust, someone who you confide in. It says, and even as Jesus said this, Judas, one of his 12 disciples, arrived with a crowd of men armed with swords. So this is Jesus he had just gotten himself out of the pits of being depressed. He said his soul was in sorrow, was in anguish. And he prayed himself through, and yes, he knew that this was what God had for him. But Judas turns up at the point at which Jesus is going through turmoil. And he comes to arrest Jesus. What a friend. And even as Jesus said this, Judas, one of the 12 disciples, arrived with a crowd of men armed with swords and clubs. They had been sent by the leading priests and elders of the people. The traitor Judas had given them a prearranged signal. You will know which one to arrest when I greet him with a kiss. So Judas came straight to Jesus. Greetings, Rabbi, he exclaimed, and he gave him the kiss. Jesus said, my friend, go ahead and do what you have come for. Then the others grabbed Jesus and arrested him. So we see here a picture of Jesus going through a really difficult time in his life, and we see a picture of Judas, his friend, his disciple, someone that he had loved, he'd cared for, he'd ministered to, actually hand him over, give him over to his enemies. I checked for the meaning of the word betrayal, and the Greek word for it is paradidomi. And in English, it means to give into the hands of another, to give over to one's power or use. When you betray someone, you sort of abandon them, you give them over to a circumstance, you leave them in the lurch, you stab them in the back, you just leave them open to attack or assault, you do nothing. I was going through the internet, I was looking at pictures of people who, like, there were themes around betrayal, and there was like 6 greatest betrayals in history. Judas was one of them. And in every single one of those scenarios, the people who handed these people over to be betrayed, they had it within their power to protect them, to stop something from happening. There were people who betrayed their government, and as a result, soldiers were killed in battle. There were people who betrayed an emperor, and he was killed. There's somebody who worked for Scotland Yard, actually, who, because he betrayed the spies during the war, people were killed. I just thought about this whole thing about betrayal, and then I looked at my own life and journeys I've had, and it seems to be something that each person will encounter. You will encounter it in one form or another. You will walk through that, and it's very painful when you go through it. I remember some time ago, someone did some things to me, and for 2 weeks, I felt ill. I just could not fathom, I could not understand how this person that I believed so much in, the person that I felt that, I'm trying not to be too, what's the word now? Be a bit vague, so you can't point fingers at anyone, but my really close friend. And the person just did some things and I could not understand. Well, in scriptures, in 2 Timothy chapter 3, God tells us about the spirit of this age. He talks about this time and this season. And I think that as the world goes and progresses and things happen in the earth, there has been released in the atmosphere just there is that spirit of betrayal. And it's harder for us when we are in church, when someone who is meant to be, your disciple, or someone who's meant to be in who we call brother or sister betrays you. It's very hard for us to comprehend how that can happen. We're just having some conversations before the podcast, and we were chatting and talking about betrayal. We talked about the fact that when you're in church, it's so hard to comprehend how that can happen, because in church, that's for you feel that that's where you don't expect that to happen, but it does happen in church. So when it happens, what do we do? How do we handle it? How do we process it? How do we deal with the issue? How do we move on with the relationship? Does it end? Does it continue? What happens between what happens between the time when something's happened to me or has happened to you and we feel betrayed and we see the person next Sunday in church or we're around that person? How do we treat them? What do we do? So all of our conversations is around these things, is how we go on, how we deal with them, how we process the things that are happening to us and allow God to walk with us. Okay, I'll read 2 Timothy chapter 3. It says, "But mark this, there will be terrible times in the last days." That's what we're living in. People will be lovers of themselves. A lot of betrayal stems from us loving ourselves. That's where it stems from. Because sometimes it's about someone either tries to take something that is yours, or someone cheats you out of something that is yours. It's because you love yourself. You're thinking of yourself first. Or someone is concerned about how they look, so they abandon you in your time of need. It's selfishness. It's the root of it. It says people will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of the good, treacherous. So treachery has to do with betrayal. Rash, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. Having a form of godliness but denying its power. Have nothing to do with such people. So these verses of scripture talk about, one of the things that it talks about is in the last days that there will come terrible times, and there will be betrayal. It talks about relationships that are broken or get broken as a result of the times that we're living in.
Thank you for listening to this message. We trust that you've been blessed, encouraged, and transformed to go out and make a difference.